Well, I'd just like to put in the point that what you raised before about using taxes to offset inflation, that in fact, if you combine a flat percentage tax on all spending, right, so that includes to buy houses, assets, every single dollar that gets spent, if the same rate of tax is applied for everybody, but everybody gets a flat amount, then what you do is you turn the combined UBI plus the flat tax into a progressive tax system. Because in the end, the people who are spending most money end up paying net tax, and the people at the bottom, while they do pay some tax, they're getting a net benefit through the UBI. And so
Yeah,
two things combined actually allow you to do a universal payment.
Okay. I don't like the idea of taxing consumption because rich
not
people.
just consumption, everything.
Yeah. Okay. It's like more like a VAT, like what Andrew Yang proposed.
Well, VAT is not so good because it means that the people in the production chain have to pay the tax themselves, right? Whereas what I'm talking about is it would be like a GST, but like a GST on everything. You buy a house for 800,000.
Yeah. I don't like
Yeah.
the idea of consumption taxes like that because they actually have on its own, if you don't factor the UBI in, if you count that separately, it's regressive.
Yeah, but that's right.
Right. So
you have to put them together. Have to put them together.
Yes, but you can also put a UBI together with a progressive taxation system, which, and I want to jump to what.
Anyway, go on. Yeah.
I want to jump to Rini again. She said, my fundamental issue with it being universal is the ultra rich get it when they absolutely don't need it. Now, I say my response to that would be the reason we give it to the ultra rich is the same reason that we give them access to public roads, the same reason we give them access to public libraries, the same reason the children of the ultra rich can go to school at a public school and not have to pay the exorbitant fees at a private school if they want, because it is part of the national infrastructure. It is, and the reason I would pair it with if I was pairing it with a tax, I would pair it with a progressive income tax increase. So you can imagine if I'm on 100,000 a year, and then through my basic income I get another 20,000 on top of that, right? If my taxes go up by 21,000 at the same time, then overall I'm 1,000 worse off, right? But that means, so if you can adjust the progressive taxation rate to address inequality, and you have basic income there as this universal payment, because this is the question: is it more troublesome that a rich person gets it who doesn't need it, or that a poor person who does need it misses out, right? Which is more upsetting, that Gina Reinhardt gets an extra $2,000 a month or whatever that she's not going to notice, or that someone who is in need is, the children are growing up in, a household where the financial stress dominates their parents' lives, right? Like, which is the bigger problem? And if the problem is that these people get too much, well, it's like, what if you're worried about them getting another $1,000 for free, imagine you'll hate to hear what they get in tax breaks at the moment, right? Like, this is not the $1,000 isn't going to meaningfully that Gina Reinhardt gets doesn't meaningfully change the position in terms of inequality. So the way to go after inequality, I would say, is with taxation. Basic income does something else. It provides this sort of, and what it can also do, it will dramatically reduce the wealth of the ultra wealthy, because the asset bubbles that we've got around, these huge stock prices, huge real estate prices, that's a result of the cheap money from the central bank. So at the moment, don't get mad about them getting $1,000. Get mad about them getting basically everything.
I just asked the question about if you wanted to take tax out, what about take a tax out when it was in a bank account, when a payment was made, when you bought something and used your bank account, that there would be a tax taken out then if the tax was needed.
Transaction tax.
Yeah. well, virtually a transaction tax, but I mean, it would be caused by a transaction, but there was a suggestion at one point that if we all paid 0.5%, we'd equal what the taxable revenue was, and that was a few years ago. I guess if it was right then, it'd be just as right now. But it might not be such a bad idea. If we
I'm not
need
sure
to-
if that's how Michael, how similar is that to what you're suggesting?
It's what it can be done if we think about income, right? So let's say you're getting $100 in income, and you're going to pay 20% tax, income tax, right? That will leave you $80 to spend. So if you spend your whole $100, you're going to spend 80 and then pay $20 in tax. So whether it's taken out at the time you earn it or the time you spend it makes no difference to the total amount of tax paid. It changes the percentage. It goes from being 20% of income to 25% of spending, but it's exactly the same. So if everybody got their income tax-free, what Barbara says is quite right. If every single person had bank accounts that were tied to them and they all received their income completely tax-free, then you could have a rule that says anytime you spend or take money out of that account, the tax comes out and it's 20% of
Well,
the
it's
income,
half a
25%.
percent was the suggestion.
Well, yeah,
Half a percent
half a percent may not do it, Barbara, because
I'm just saying that's what the story was.
No, that's right. The issue really is that GDP in total tax currently is about 30% of GDP. So, and if we take GDP as our national income, being the sum total of all our individual incomes, which is not quite right, but it's good enough for the idea. That means that all of us together are paying about 30% of our income in tax to all the state and local and federal authorities totally. Now we pay it in bits and pieces. We pay it in corporate tax and payroll tax and income tax and all sorts of taxes. But if we grossed it all up, it's around about 30%. And so if all of us got our royalties and our fees and our wages, if everybody got that tax-free, paid straight into our bank account, we could then have the basic rule, 30% of the income as you spend it then goes off.
Yeah. But then you're compounding. I think some inequality that we already have in our economy. Josh.
Well,
Yeah, I
pay
question
the UBI to get rid of the inequality, right? In other words, the UBI.
Hold on, I'll just respond to Michael before he said. I would say the opposite. That we use the UBI to supply the economy with the money it needs, and then we use taxes to deal with inequality. That's why I would say that. So you want a progressive taxation system that taxes most from the rich and least from the poor, so that and if you bring in these tax changes and the UBI together, there is not necessarily a net increase. There may be a net decrease for the income of the Gina Rineharts of the world and so on, as Rini was raising before. Josh, did you have something to add?
I challenge whether we want to be taxing income or wealth, because if we're taxing income, then a billionaire who doesn't make any income wouldn't be taxed. And I feel like we're targeting the wrong thing if we're taxing income. And my preferred kind of tax would be something that I haven't seen anywhere, but effectively you'd, so say you were to tax land, because you think some people are hoarding too much land, you figure out how much would be if Australia was to be split into equal pieces and everybody was to have an equal piece, if somebody has more than that amount, then you tax them to say effectively that you can't take more than your fair share of the country's.
I admire that principle, but I think this land thing is a bit crazy because different bits of land are worth different amounts, right? It's more about the water that's on them or the access to other infrastructure or something like that than the square footage.
Sure.
So I mean
not land specifically, just assets. I'm saying just
okay.
generally.
Yeah.
Very quickly, what's the attitude to treating the basic income as income for welfare and tax purposes?
Well, look, I get hear different. I've heard different positions on this. I don't think it matters that much whether you do or you don't, because you can count it as
part of your income.
as part of your income, and then you can adjust tax rates so that you get the same net result, same end result. I think that's a little bit one of the things. I mean, one thing I would say is that moving to a fully universal payment and getting off of having separate welfare payments has one advantage, that if it's done by the tax office, right, then you're only measuring income once. The tax office measures your income, and that's it. Now we've got Department of Human Services and the tax office both measuring and checking your income and cross-referencing, and that's more moving parts and becomes and more things that can go wrong.
I agree with you, Austin. Again, the strategic view from my point of view is, if we did this saying, yes, it will count as income because it's extra income, it will count as income for tax and welfare. We're not changing anything of the rest of the system, so don't panic, guys. But over time, then, of course, it will naturally, as it raises, phase out the welfare benefit, and it will naturally, as it's paid to higher income people, they will pay tax on it at their higher income rate. And so it's
see, to me it's a bit like this question of whether the central bank prints money and then the government spends it, or whether the government spends it and then the central bank prints it.